The dust swirled across the weathered boardwalk as Isaac Quinn rode into Medicine Bow, Wyoming Territory, in the summer of 1874, a man whose haunted eyes told more stories than his lips ever would. The small frontier town, nestled between rolling plains and distant mountains, represented nothing more to him than another temporary stop, a place to earn enough money to keep moving west, away from memories that chased him like shadows at sunset. Medicine Bow wasn't much to look at. A single main street lined with false-fronted buildings, a couple of saloons, a general store, a small church, and the newly constructed railroad station that had breathed fresh life into what would otherwise be a forgotten spot on the map. Isaac dismounted his dun gelding outside Thornton's livery, his boots hitting the dirt with a soft thud that matched the weariness in his bones. "Looking for work?" asked the livery owner, a balding man with suspenders stretched across his substantial belly. Isaac nodded once. "Anything available?" McCready's ranch, the Triple M, might be hiring. He lost 2 hands last month, one to a Cheyenne woman, another to a broken neck when his horse stepped in a prairie dog hole. Isaac touched the brim of his hat in acknowledgement. "Much obliged." 3 days later, he was sleeping in the bunkhouse at the Triple M, keeping to himself during meals, speaking only when spoken to, and working harder than any 2 men combined. The other cowboys attempted friendly overtures, invitations to Saturday night revelries in town, stories around the evening fire, all met with polite but firm refusals. "Quinn's running from something fierce," one hand whispered to another. "Ain't we all?" came the reply. "Let the man be." And they did. For 6 months, Isaac Quinn was the phantom of the Triple M, present but never truly there, his skill with horses and cattle unquestioned, his past unknown, his future unspoken, until the day Kathleen Vance stepped off the eastbound train. She arrived on a crisp October afternoon, her chestnut hair pinned neatly beneath a modest hat, her traveling suit the color of summer wheat. At 24, Kathleen Cady, to those who knew her, had come to Medicine Bow to take ownership of her late uncle's mercantile store, her last living relative having left her this unexpected inheritance. "Miss Vance." The station master approached, consulting a telegram in his hand. "We've been expecting you. Mr. Peterson from the bank is supposed to meet you, but he's been delayed. Can I help you with your trunks in the meantime?" "Thank you. That would be most kind," Cady replied, her voice carrying the soft lilt of her Philadelphia upbringing. Isaac was in town that day, reluctantly sent by the ranch foreman to purchase supplies. He was loading sacks of flour into the wagon when he saw her, not with the immediate interest of a man seeing a beautiful woman, but with the wary assessment of someone who had learned to notice everything around him. Cady, feeling the weight of a stranger's gaze, turned and met his eyes across the busy street. Something in his expression, exhaustion etched into the lines of his face, caught her attention, but the moment passed as the station master called for her assistance with the luggage. Over the next month, Medicine Bow buzzed with talk of the new shopkeeper. The mercantile had been closed since old Roger Vance's passing 3 months prior, and the town had felt the absence. Cady reopened with efficiency and warmth that quickly endeared her to the townspeople. Her education and Eastern refinement might have created distance in another woman, but Cady's genuine interest in her customers' lives bridged any gaps. "That gal's a breath of fresh air," declared Mrs. Holcomb at the Sunday church social. "Helped me find just the right buttons for Elmer's shirt, then showed me how they'd look with different thread. Been buying buttons for 40 years and never had such service." Isaac heard the talk but kept his distance. His trips to town became even more infrequent, sending other hands with supply lists when possible. On the rare occasions he ventured into the mercantile, he kept his transactions brief, his eyes averted, his words few. 1 pound of coffee, please. 2 boxes of ammunition for a Winchester. Pair of work gloves. Katie noticed this tall, solemn cowboy who never lingered. Unlike her other customers, he resisted her attempts at conversation, responding with the minimum required words. His reticence might have offended her had she not caught, on occasion, the profound weariness in his eyes, not just physical tiredness, but the bone-deep exhaustion of a soul carrying too heavy a burden. The winter of 1874 descended on Wyoming with merciless fury. December brought blizzards that isolated ranches for weeks at a time. January followed with temperatures that froze water buckets solid in minutes. February arrived with more of the same, stretching nerves and supplies to their limits. It was during a rare break in the weather that Isaac rode into town for emergency provisions. The triple MTK's food stores were running dangerously low, and 5 men had drawn straws for the dangerous ride. Isaac had won or lost, depending on one's perspective. The mercantile was empty when he entered, stamping snow from his boots. Katie emerged from the back room, a ledger in her hands, surprise registering on her face. "Mr. Quinn, isn't it? I wasn't expecting anyone today with the roads still nearly impassable. Need supplies." His voice was rough from disuse and cold. Macready sent a list. He extended a paper, his gloved hand trembling slightly, a detail that didn't escape Katie's notice. "You must be frozen through. Let me build up the fire while I gather these items." Before he could object, she moved to the pot-bellied stove in the corner and added several logs, stoking the flames until heat radiated outward. Then, she efficiently began collecting the items on the list, moving around the store with practiced ease. Isaac stood awkwardly by the stove, the warmth making him aware of just how cold he'd been. His face stung as feeling returned to his cheeks and nose. 3 days of hard riding through dangerous conditions had left him more depleted than he cared to admit. Katie worked in silence for several minutes, respecting his apparent preference for quiet. But as she placed the last items on the counter and began calculating the total, she glanced up to find him swaying slightly, his eyes unfocused. "Mr. Quinn, are you unwell?" He straightened immediately. "I'm fine, madam. Forgive my bluntness, but you look exhausted." Her voice held genuine concern rather than mere politeness. "When did you last eat or sleep properly?" The unexpected directness of her question, or perhaps his own fatigue, broke through his usual reserve. "Been a while," he admitted. "Started snowing again halfway here. Had to take shelter in a lined shack overnight." Katie made a quick decision. "I have stew simmering in the back. The mercantile's quiet today. Most folks still can't get to town. Please join me for a meal before you start back." Isaac's instinct was to refuse, to maintain the distance he'd carefully cultivated. But the thought of hot food and a few more minutes by the fire overrode his caution. "That's kind of you, Miss Vance." Katie smiled, the first real smile he'd allowed himself to notice. "It's just Katie to my friends, Mr. Quinn." "Isaac," he offered quietly, surprising himself. In the small back room that served as both storage area and Katie's private quarters, a pot of rabbit stew bubbled on a small stove. The space was neat and modestly furnished, a cot against one wall, a small table with 2 chairs, shelves of inventory, and a trunk that presumably held her personal belongings. As she ladled stew into bowls, Katie spoke casually. "I never asked why you look so tired all the time, Mr. Quinn." "Isaac, it's not just today. Every time you come into the store, you look like you're carrying the weight of the world." The spoon paused halfway to Isaac's mouth. No one had asked him such a thing in years, not directly. People speculated behind his back, but they respected the unspoken rule of the West. A man's past was his own business. Just the work, he said finally. Ranching's not easy. No, I don't imagine it is, Katie agreed, breaking off a piece of cornbread. But the other hands from Triple M don't have that same look. They're tired, certainly, but not haunted. The word hung between them. Isaac set down his spoon and looked at her directly for perhaps the first time. Her eyes were a warm brown, intelligent and kind, without the pity he so despised. "You're very direct for an Eastern lady," he observed. "Philadelphia bred, yes, but my mother was from Colorado Territory. She believed in speaking plainly." Katie held his gaze. "You don't have to answer, I just thought. Sometimes telling a stranger is easier than telling someone you know well." Isaac looked down at his bowl, struggling with an unexpected desire to do just that, to speak of things he'd buried for years. The silence stretched between them, not uncomfortable but weighted with possibility. "I was a Union soldier," he said finally, the words emerging rusty from disuse. "Saw things no man should see. Did things no man should have to do. When it ended, I couldn't go home, didn't have one anymore. My family's farm in Ohio was sold for taxes while I was fighting. My parents died of influenza. My brother fell at Gettysburg." Katie's face showed compassion without pity. "The war's been over 9 years. Not for some of us." Isaac's voice was low. "Sometimes I close my eyes and I'm right back there, Chancellorsville, Antietam, Cold Harbor. Nights are the worst." "You don't sleep," she said. "It wasn't a question, not much. Few hours here and there." He shrugged. "Been moving west ever since. Never stay anywhere long. Work until the memories get too loud, then move on." Katie considered this. "How long have you been at the Triple M now?" 6 months. Longer than usual." He didn't add that he'd been considering moving on again soon. Spring would make traveling easier. "Medicine Bow could use men who know hard work," she said. "This territory's still growing. Building something new might be healing." Isaac almost smiled, almost. "You sound like my commanding officer." "Build something, Quinn, instead of dwelling on what's torn down." Wise man. He died at Petersburg, leading a charge we both knew was futile. The conversation might have ended there on that somber note, but a violent gust of wind rattled the windows, drawing their attention to the worsening weather. "You can't ride back in this," Katie said firmly. "It would be suicide. McCready's expecting these supplies. Men are hungry." "And a dead courier helps no one," she countered. "You can sleep in the storeroom tonight. I'll make up a pallet. The storm should pass by morning." Isaac wanted to refuse staying overnight, accepting help, engaging in conversation. These were dangerous steps away from the solitary path he'd chosen. Yet the logic of her argument was undeniable. The blizzard outside had intensified to white-out conditions. "I appreciate the offer," he said finally. "I'll pay for the lodging, of course." Katie waved this away. "Consider it payment for the story you just shared." "First time I've heard you say more than 10 words together." That night, lying on a surprisingly comfortable pallet among sacks of grain and boxes of merchandise, Isaac slept more soundly than he had in years. Perhaps it was the exhaustion of the journey, or the warmth of the store, or the lingering comfort of a shared meal and conversation, whatever the cause. His usual nightmares remained at bay until dawn. When he awoke, pale winter sunlight was filtering through the windows. The storm had passed, leaving a crystalline world of white outside. Katie was already up, moving quietly around the store, preparing for the day's business. "Coffee's hot," she said when she noticed him watching. "And I've fried some salt pork and eggs." "You didn't need to do that," Isaac said, embarrassed by her kindness. Neighbors help neighbors out here. That's what my uncle always wrote in his letters. She smiled. Besides, I enjoy the company. It gets lonely living above a store. After breakfast, Isaac loaded the supplies onto his horse. The air was bitterly cold but still, perfect for traveling if one dressed warmly enough. Katie had added extra food to his provisions for the men, she insisted, and refused additional payment. At the moment of departure, standing in the bright morning sun with their breath clouding between them, Isaac found himself reluctant to leave. "Thank you," he said, the words inadequate for what he felt. "For everything." "You're welcome back anytime, Isaac Quinn." Her cheeks were pink from the cold. "For supplies or conversation." He nodded once, touched his hat brim, and mounted his horse. As he rode away, he glanced back to see her standing in the doorway of the mercantile, a smile on her face and one hand raised in farewell. Something had changed, though Isaac couldn't name it yet. A door long closed had been cracked open, letting in a sliver of light. The following weeks brought a subtle shift in pattern. Isaac's trips to town, once rare and rushed, became more frequent. His visits to the mercantile extended beyond the time strictly necessary for transactions. Sometimes, if the store was empty of other customers, Katie would offer coffee. Sometimes he would accept. Their conversations unfolded gradually, like spring flowers cautiously testing the air after winter's retreat. Katie spoke of her childhood in Philadelphia, her father's work as a printer, her mother's early death. Her years teaching at a girls' school before her uncle's bequest offered a different path. Isaac, in halting sentences that grew smoother with practice, shared selective memories of his youth in Ohio, his time at university studying engineering before the war interrupted, his dreams long abandoned of building bridges and railroads. "You still could," Katie suggested one snowy afternoon in March as they sat drinking coffee near the stove. "The West needs builders." Isaac shook his head. "That was another life, another man." "The knowledge is still in you," she persisted. "I've seen how you fixed my storage shelves last week, calculating load and stress, measuring twice. Your hands remember even if you think your heart has forgotten." The insight startled him. No one had observed him so carefully in years, or perhaps no one had cared enough to try understanding what they saw. Spring arrived with its usual Wyoming temperament, wild swings between warm, promising days, and sudden returns to winter's grip. The Triple M began the exhausting work of spring roundup, keeping all hands busy from dawn to dusk and beyond. Isaac's visits to town grew sporadic again, but now there was a purpose to them beyond mere necessity. In town, people noticed. The taciturn cowboy and the eastern shopkeeper became subjects of speculation, though most had the courtesy to keep their observations subtle. "Nice to see Miss Vance settling in so well, Mrs. Holcomb," remarked to her husband after witnessing Isaac carrying supplies to the mercantile storeroom one Saturday. "And that Quinn fellow seems less grim these days." By May, wildflowers carpeted the plains, and cattle grew fat on new grass. Isaac found himself volunteering for town errands more often than not. The nightmares still came, but less frequently. Sometimes he went entire weeks sleeping through the night, waking with the realization that his mind had granted him peace. It was during one such peaceful period that he made a decision. The Saturday town trip was approaching, and instead of just the usual supply run, he had something more in mind. "Permission to stay in town overnight, sir?" he asked McCready on Friday evening. "Personal business to attend to." The rancher raised an eyebrow but nodded. "Spring work's caught up. Take the time if you need it." The next morning, Isaac did something he hadn't done in nearly a decade. He shaved meticulously, trimmed his hair, and put on his one good shirt, purchased months ago but never worn. The other hands exchanged knowing looks but said nothing directly. In town, he stopped first at the barber for a proper haircut, then at the hotel to rent a room and take a real bath. By mid-afternoon, he stood outside the Mercantile, freshly groomed, wearing clean clothes, holding his hat in suddenly uncertain hands. When he entered, Katie was helping Mrs. Peterson select fabric. Her smile of greeting faltered momentarily as she took in his transformed appearance, then returned with increased warmth. "Be with you shortly, Mr. Quinn," she said, her professional tone belied by the color rising in her cheeks. Isaac nodded and pretended to examine a display of pocket knives while the transaction concluded. When Mrs. Peterson finally departed, the store was empty except for the two of them. "You look," Katie began, then seemed to search for an appropriate word. "Cleaned up." Isaac offered, a rare smile tugging at his lips. "I was going to say different, but yes, very nicely so." She came around the counter. "Is there a special occasion I should know about?" Isaac took a breath, steadying himself. "I was hoping you might join me for supper at the hotel dining room." The invitation hung between them, not just a meal but a public acknowledgement of something neither had yet defined. "I'd be delighted," Katie said, her voice soft. "What time shall I be ready?" 6 o'clock. "I could come escort you." "I'd like that very much." The hotel dining room was Medicine Bow's attempt at elegance: white tablecloths, decent china, a small vase of wildflowers on each table. It wasn't Philadelphia or even Cheyenne, but for a frontier town, it represented a special occasion. Isaac arrived at the Mercantile at precisely 6, his palms sweating despite the cool evening air. When Katie emerged, having closed the shop early to prepare, he momentarily forgot how to speak. She wore a dress of deep blue, her hair arranged more elaborately than her usual practical style, with small pearl earrings that caught the light. "You look beautiful," he managed finally. "Thank you." Her smile was shy but pleased. "Shall we?" They walked the short distance to the hotel, aware of curious glances from townspeople but focused primarily on each other. The dining room was relatively busy, and their entrance caused a brief lull in conversations before the buzz resumed, now interspersed with whispered observations. Over a dinner of roast beef, potatoes, and apple pie, they talked with increasing ease. Isaac found himself laughing at Katie's stories of mercantile mishaps, while she listened intently to his more carefully chosen tales of ranch life. "I've been thinking," he said as they lingered over coffee, "about what you said, about building things." Katie's eyes brightened. "Oh, the railroad's expanding its maintenance yard here. They're looking for someone who understands structural engineering. It's not designing bridges, but—" "You applied?" she asked, hope evident in her voice. "Had an interview yesterday. They offered me the position today." He looked down at his coffee cup. "It means staying in Medicine Bow permanently." The word hung between them, heavy with implication. "And is that what you want?" Katie asked carefully. "To stay," Isaac met her eyes. "I've been running for 9 years. Maybe it's time to stop, to see if I can build something new like you suggested." "I'm glad," she said simply, though her eyes conveyed much more. They walked back to the Mercantile slowly, neither rushing to end the evening. The spring night was mild, stars brilliant overhead, the town quiet except for distant piano music from the saloon. At her door, Isaac hesitated. "Thank you for joining me tonight. Thank you for asking me." Katie's voice was soft in the darkness. He took her hand, an action that felt both daring and natural. "May I call on you again? Properly, I mean." "I'd be disappointed if you didn't." Impulsively, he raised her hand to his lips, brushing a kiss across her knuckles. "Good night, Katie." "Good night, Isaac." Summer brought change to Medicine Bow and to Isaac Quinn. He left the Triple M amicably, with McCready's blessing and promises to visit. He took lodgings in town, close to the railroad yard where he now supervised a team of workers maintaining and expanding the facilities. The work engaged his mind in ways ranching never had, calling upon knowledge and skills he'd buried along with his other pre-war memories. His courtship of Katie Vance progressed with a careful deliberateness that reflected both their natures. Sunday afternoon walks, picnics by the creek when weather permitted, occasional suppers at the hotel. They attended church together, sat side by side at town socials, and gradually became acknowledged as a pair in the community's eyes. "Never thought I'd see the day," McCready commented during one of Isaac's visits to the ranch. "That shadow of a man who rode in last year, now walking out in the sunshine with the prettiest gal in the county." For Katie, the relationship unfolded like a cherished book, each page revealing new depths to the man she'd first noticed only for his exhaustion. She learned to recognize when the memories threatened to overwhelm him, discovered how to gently draw him back to the present without demanding explanations or offering platitudes. Isaac, in turn, found himself opening spaces within that had been sealed off for nearly a decade. He relearned how to plan beyond the next day or week, how to imagine a future that held more than mere survival. The nightmares didn't disappear entirely, but their power diminished. On particularly bad nights, he would walk through town until dawn, then stop at the mercantile's back door where Katie would wordlessly offer coffee and quiet company before the day began. It was during one such morning in late August that Isaac finally spoke the words that had been building in him for months. "I love you," he said simply, setting down his coffee cup on her small table. "I think I have since that blizzard day when you asked why I looked so tired." Katie's eyes filled with tears. "I've loved you since I saw you trying not to smile when I told that ridiculous story about Mrs. Holcomb's cat getting into the yarn display." He reached across the table, taking both her hands in his. "I'm not whole, Katie. I might never be. The war took pieces of me I can't get back. None of us are whole," she replied. "We're all just broken people finding ways to fit our pieces together with someone else's. Is that what we're doing? I'd like to think so." Her smile was radiant through her tears. "I'd like to keep doing it for the rest of our lives if you'll have me." Isaac rose from his chair and knelt beside her, still holding her hands. "Catherine Vance, would you do me the great honor of becoming my wife?" "Yes," she answered without hesitation. 1,000 times yes. They married in October, exactly 1 year after Katie had first arrived in Medicine Bow. The church overflowed with well-wishers, townspeople who had watched their story unfold, ranch hands from the Triple M, railroad workers who had come to respect their serious but fair-minded supervisor. Katie wore a gown of cream-colored silk ordered from Denver, with late-blooming wildflowers in her hair. Isaac, in a new black suit, stood straight and tall at the altar, his face more peaceful than anyone in town had ever seen it. "Dearly beloved," the minister began, and Isaac found himself fully present in the moment, not pulled backward into memories or propelled forward by the restless need to move on. Their vows were simple but heartfelt. When Isaac placed the gold band on Katie's finger, his hands were steady. When she reached up to touch his face after their first kiss as husband and wife, the congregation broke into spontaneous applause. The celebration afterward, held in the town hall, lasted well into the evening. There was dancing and feasting, speeches and toasts, laughter and a few sentimental tears. "To Isaac and Katie," McCready announced, raising his glass high. "Proof that even in this hard country, good things grow when given time and care." Late that night, after the last guests had departed, and they stood alone in what had been Katie's rooms above the mercantile, now expanded into a proper apartment for them. Both Isaac took his wife in his arms. "You asked me once why I looked so tired," he murmured against her hair. "Tonight I'm not tired at all," Katie laughed softly. "A miracle indeed." "No," he said, drawing back to look into her eyes. "Not a miracle, just love, just you." In the years that followed, Isaac and Katie Quinn built a life in Medicine Bow that neither could have imagined when they first met. The mercantile prospered under their joint management, Isaac's engineering mind improving the store's layout and inventory systems, while Katie's warm personality continued to draw customers. Isaac's position with the railroad expanded as the town grew in importance as a maintenance hub. By 1880, he was overseeing the design and construction of new facilities, finally putting his education to its intended use. Their first child, a son they named William after Isaac's fallen brother, arrived in 1876, followed 2 years later by a daughter, Margaret, named for Katie's mother. A third child, another boy they called James, completed their family in 1881. The nightmares never completely vanished, but they retreated to rare occurrences rather than regular torments. On the occasional nights when Isaac still woke in cold sweat, Katie was there, sometimes with just a touch, sometimes with quiet words, always with understanding. "It's passing," she would murmur. "You're here now with me, with our children, you're home." And he was. After years of wandering, Isaac Quinn had finally stopped running. The memories would always be part of him, but they no longer defined him. Instead, he was defined by the life he'd built. Husband, father, respected community member, builder of structures both physical and personal. When visitors came to Medicine Bow in later years, they would sometimes comment on the distinguished-looking man with silver at his temples who could be seen walking hand in hand with his still beautiful wife down the main street on summer evenings. "That's Isaac Quinn," locals would say with pride. "Finest structural engineer in the territory. Came here years ago, just another tired cowboy passing through." Then Miss Katie asked him why he looked so exhausted, and the rest, as they say, is history. And so it was their history, written in a shared life, day by day, year by year, in a town that had become not just a stopping place, but a home.